We just want you to know that we feel like homeschooling works. In high school, it works particularly well, and you have options as a parent. And yours does not need to look like your neighbors or your best friend at church or anywhere. I think that's one reason homeschooling flourishes. Families can embrace the vision God has given them.
You have to just forge ahead in obedience, and you have to trust that God will guide you in that process. He's not going to lead you to something and then just leave you hanging. He's going to guide you through it. With the tremendous amount of tools we have available, there's no need to feel overwhelmed or to feel inadequate for the task. There are so many things out there to help you.
Welcome to the Zan Tyler podcast, Thriving in Your Homeschool. I'm Zan, and today we're picking back up with part 2 of our conversation on homeschooling in high school. If you missed part 1, I'd encourage you to go back and listen. But here's a quick reminder of who we're talking with today. Beth Martin spent years as a middle school teacher before discovering her real calling as a homeschool mom to her 3 children. Since 2022, she served as high school program director for the Upstate Homeschool Co-op, guiding over 400 students and their families through the high school years. Today, we will discuss some of the specifics of preparing your teens for life after homeschooling, whether that is in college, the military, the trades, a gap year, or the job market. So please enjoy the conversation. Let's talk about co-ops and really the things we can do academically to help prepare our kids for the next step. I think it was really important for us to lay the groundwork that there's so many other ways for our kids to flourish in addition to academics. But let's talk about that for the parent now who needs help in really figuring out how to go through the college admissions process, or getting their kids into the military, or starting a business, or the gap year, or all these things that are now available after our kids. So briefly, tell us what you're doing now in the co-op you work with and what you did at SCAES.
Yeah, so I had 10 wonderful years at SCAES, and I was the high school director there, working with counseling families, kind of like a guidance counselor, but also a lot of coordinating with colleges, with the Commission on Higher Ed, with the Department of Ed. And because we wanted to be in the know, we wanted to know what was expected of the public schools, what the colleges were expecting, not because we necessarily need to follow it all the time, but it's helpful to have that information. I'm a researcher. I like to know all the things before I make a decision. And so I love doing that, and I would still be there, but we moved to a different location, and remote work just wasn't the best fit for me on a daily basis. And so I am now the high school program director at Upstate Homeschool Co-op. It's a very large co-op in upstate South Carolina.
How many students and campuses do you have now in that co-op?
So we have 4 campuses and just over 1,700 students in K through 12. So high schoolers, we have about 400 students on 2 campuses. So I oversee the program, the whole high school program, and I get to have a lot of daily interaction or 2-day-a-week interaction with those high schoolers and have a lot of face-to-face time. I get to talk to them between classes. I get to pop into classes and help teachers out. And it's been very challenging, but it's very rewarding, and I really enjoy that.
So tell us now, co-ops have been around since probably the late 90s. I know Joe and I started a co-op, Excelsior. It was Masters Academy for the Fine Arts then, like in 1997 or 98. And that was really the beginning days of co-ops. But since 2020, since COVID, co-ops have really exploded. So tell us what you think are the benefits of co-ops, and especially for high school students at this point, and what you think parents need to look for in a co-op.
I did not use a co-op at all for my kids. Starting homeschooling in the late 90s, there weren't a lot of options, and it just wasn't a fit for us. There weren't any close by to us. So we did not use co-ops at all, and we made it through. So it can be done. But I do see some great opportunities with co-ops for families that need just a little extra help. They just need somebody to come alongside them and provide some support in some areas. It's interesting when COVID came about and there was such a huge increase in the number of people homeschooling because they were seeing what was happening in their kids' classes and they were either dissatisfied or felt that maybe they could do it just as well. So they tried it. And then I think what happened was as parents had to start to go back to work, so they couldn't work from home anymore, they didn't really want to give up homeschooling. And what co-ops can allow or afford a parent is maybe mom can still work 2 days a week on the day that the kids are at co-op and then be at home the other 3 days. So it allows a little flexibility there. But it also just helps those parents that say, I just don't think I can teach Spanish, or I'm just not sure I want to dissect a frog in my kitchen. And so it allows them to get some help in those areas. And I also think it's a good way for the kids to be taught by somebody different than mom and dad. Not that mom and dad can't do it, but it gives a different presentation of the material. It gives a different expectation. So they start to learn, oh, this is what this person wants. So like I tell my high school teachers, as long as you're all clearly communicating, I'm okay with you handling things a little different in each class. Just make sure the kids know. And then I tell the parents and kids, you do what that teacher asks you to do. If they want it turned in on paper, turn it in on paper. If this teacher wants it uploaded online, then upload it online. But they start to learn some of those variations, and that's a good preparation for life in general and college ahead.
I do think one of the things, Lizzie was the only one of my kids who had access to a co op. And I can remember us being up late at night meeting deadlines. And really, that's not a bad skill to learn because
Yeah.
when you're at home, it's easy to say, okay, well, we'll do that tomorrow. We'll do this after vacation. We'll do this after dad goes back to work, or, I mean, just whatever. And so I think it's nice to learn from different personalities.
Mhm.
um, I was always, I was the parent who probably thought, that is great. That's so good. You're making progress.
I can see you
And
doing that.
so, yeah, but then they also needed to come home and say, I really tried on that, and I don't think my teacher really appreciated that. I mean, you just have to learn how to cope in different environments with different expectations, like you said, in different teaching styles. So I think there are a number of things that kids do learn from co-ops. I don't think they're essential, but I do think they have a place now in the educational scheme of things in homeschooling, and parents have those choices.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely not something you have to do, but it can support your education. And I do regularly see families where I think if they didn't have the support of a co-op, they might not have the confidence to continue homeschooling. And so sometimes
Right.
even just a little bit, even taking a class or two, our classes for the high school are a la carte, so they can choose just one class or multiple classes. And sometimes just that little bit of help can boost the parents'
Yes.
confidence and help them press on and continue on and keep doing this.
I remember what we didn't have co-ops when my boys were coming along in the mid to late 90s in terms of their high school years. But we did have Mr. Stodenbauer, who started a science class and did the labs with them all the way from biology through physics. And we had a Spanish tutor. And so it was a relief for me not to have to teach the things I was not good at. Now, I did teach those things all the way up through the 8th grade, and I would have done that if I had needed to, but I just looked at that as the Lord's provision in their life and my life. And like you say, it doesn't have to be all their classes. It can be a few of their classes. And then there are the co-ops, Beth, like the PAC organization in Columbia, which is I can't ever remember what PAC stands for, but it's their sports league, and they have somebody who's given us this $1 million gym. And so they have basketball teams and football teams that are all homeschool based, volleyball teams. And I just think having that camaraderie with other homeschool kids and families is priceless in some ways. You and I had to be loners because there just weren't that many people to pull from. I mean, not loners like we hid away, but there just weren't a lot of families to homeschool in connection with.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. We had a core group of families that we found over the years that were great, and I very much valued them. But I see now that kids have way more opportunities in that regard. And at our co-op, we have things like yearbook, and we have student government. We have a podcast group that they do videos, and they're hilarious to watch the videos that they do, and a lot of great opportunities for our students to do other things. And it's fun to see them come and interact and have that opportunity. But at the same time, it's only 2 days a week. So again, going back to that peer dependent versus family dependent, they're not totally, in fact, they're spending more time doing work at home with their parent than they are at co-op. So they are still, we're coming alongside them, and the parent is still the primary teacher. And there's some co-ops that are more structured. Ours is probably a little bit more academic and structured, but there are some that are a lot more casual, and maybe they just focus on electives, and different parents swap off teaching some of the things that they like to teach. And those are great too. You just have to find, if you want to do one, which one fits what your family needs.
That's right. And I think too, we just need to say here for those parents who are traditionally homeschooling in high school, that's great too. You're the one doing most of the work, maybe an online class here or there, but your kids are home. They're still, they still have their friends at church and in the neighborhood and in the homeschool group and all of those things. So we just want you to know that we feel like homeschooling works. And in high school, it works particularly well, and you have options as a parent. And yours does not need to look like your neighbors or your best friend at church or anywhere. It's just, I think that's one reason homeschooling flourishes, because families can embrace the vision God has given them for homeschooling. One thing I want to talk about, Beth, for just a minute, is if parents are home, the value of the BJU Press video series, because I think those are particularly well done, and I would have loved to have had those when my kids were in high school, to pick up a course here or a course there, or I have several friends who use it not like an online school, but they are classes that they can take all the classes in high school. So again, I think that's a valuable tool.
Absolutely. I love that opportunity to have the teacher providing instruction. Again, it's allowing the student to learn from a different teaching style. But the beauty of the BJU materials, the videos, is they can choose when they're going to watch them. So if you're a family, especially that has a busy schedule, that maybe you travel, maybe you want that flexibility, you don't want to be locked into certain days of a synchronous class, you have the opportunity to do those videos at any time. And you invited me to one of the BJU events where I got to tour the press's studio where they film these, and I was just blown away by the props, the learning tools, all the things they had to make their classroom so that they could teach and make I mean, they weren't just standing like I am in front of a blank wall talking. They were engaging and just really making it interesting. And I think I've always loved BJU books. But if you have a student that needs more than just reading a book, I love the combination of bringing those videos in. It's just such a beautiful combination.
And for those of you who may not know, it's one teacher per student. It's not a classroom of students where the teacher is being recorded in front of a classroom, but it's one on one instruction. They're short videos, anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes, depending on the subject and the grade level. There's stop and start times, like the teacher may say, okay, let's stop the video and work on this page in this textbook or workbook. So they are dynamic, and I do believe in the hub, which is our digital tool for planning with the videos, just makes it pretty incredible. And I do want to thank BJU Press Homeschool for sponsoring this podcast, for their love of homeschooling and their support of the homeschooling community. It's been such a blessing to me and others. So let's talk for just a minute about let's talk about elective courses for a minute, and then I want to talk about how parents start working on transcripts and how they help their children with the college application process.
Yeah.
So electives, real quickly.
Yeah, electives are, I think, a great way to just kind of go above and beyond. Like there's always going to be core classes that you need, those core academics. And sometimes you just have to say to your kids, you're just going to have to jump through that hoop. You have to have those math courses. You have to have those English courses. But electives are where you can bring in the interests and bring in things that will showcase your student. So let's say your student really wants to pursue a selective college for admissions. So they might choose electives in the core academic areas. Their electives might be additional English, math, science, and social studies courses. But maybe they don't have that same drive to be a really they still want to maybe go to college, or maybe they want to go to a 2-year school, but they can choose electives that really follow their passions and interests. So maybe they do. The first thing I usually tell a parent is, what is your student already doing? Like, what are the things that they enjoy doing? And they might say, oh, well, you know what? They really they love spending time with their grandpa in the workshop. And so we talk about, well, why don't you do a woodworking class? Or they say, well, they've always been interested in welding. So then we talk about, how can you do a welding class? Or just following their interests and passions. And that kind of brings the fun into it. It makes it, and I like to sprinkle the electives throughout the high school years so that there's a balance there and they're always doing something that they really enjoy. But in a lot of cases, it's basically putting a credit on something that they already are doing to start with.
I love that. I know that, because the boys grew up at the State House with me, they spent time working for a senator. They spent time in campaigns. They spent time in Team Pact, all of these things. And so, we would read a book or do an assignment, but then work those things into leadership classes or credits and civics credits because I wanted their leadership abilities and the unique opportunities they had to be on their transcript, not just the resume. And so we created leadership courses. Now, that was not to take the place of any of the courses they had to have to get into colleges, but I wanted a college admissions person to see that in them. John was very interested in science. We thought he was going to be a doctor, and he had a friend, the McKenzies, he traveled with. Well, they had gone. They had gone to a conference out in the West, Utah or somewhere where they were, Wyoming, where they did a lot of snow skiing. And we had gone to the beach. He had had several trips that year that the Lord had provided. And so we did a half credit on ecosystems, all the different ecosystems he had visited. He did some reading, he did some studying. We planned it out well so he had the appropriate amount of hours or coursework or however you have to do it in your state. But those things were a lot of fun. And so I love the fact that you brought up the point that what are they already doing? Turn that into a credit.
Yeah, because you're already halfway there. So in fact, you may be more than halfway there. It's just learning how, like, what are some finishing touches I need to put onto it to ensure that it is that high school credit. But absolutely, I love doing that. And I love also bringing in practical things. All of my kids did a half credit course called auto upkeep, so they could learn about their cars. And my daughter to this day still changes her own oil in her car. She brings it over to the house and
That's
puts it up on
amazing.
the
Yeah.
ramps here at the house and changes her oil because she learned how to do it then.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And finance courses,
Mhm.
just day-to-day finances courses, those are remarkable too. So you have the freedom to really be creative. Music courses, drama courses, all those types of things that your kids may be involved in. Okay, so Beth, we have a high school student and they want to go to college. When do you start thinking about that as a parent?
Yeah. So it as soon as you know that they might be interested, I think it's a good idea to start exploring. What I see too often is kids get to their senior year and suddenly there's this big panic and a rush and a pressure to try to figure out what they're going to do because they haven't really explored anything. So I think if there's any at all possibility that your student is going to go to college, start even in ninth and 10th grade with exploring interests of what they might want to pursue, whether, and that could be researching things. It could be talking to neighbors and people at church and family members about what they do. It could be exploring some job shadowing and some internships to try to get to know what's out there. But also starting college visits. Junior or sophomore year, you could start some college visits for sure. By the junior year, you want to be doing those. Most colleges have preview days or open houses or college tours. It's a great time to start exploring all of that. And also being aware of what types of classes they need. And this is going to vary from state to state. So I recommend that you look at what your state requires for a high school diploma and start with that. Now, in South Carolina, there's nothing by law that says we have to get those credits in, but I think it's just wise because at a minimum, it's not unreasonable.
That's what most colleges are going to be requiring too. So along with the state requirements, a parent can look at, okay, we may be interested in these 3 colleges and look at what they're requiring for their incoming freshmen. Doesn't mean your child has to go there, but that's going to be a pretty good pattern. Do they need 4 credits in math and 4 credits in English and how many credits in a foreign language? Those, you just don't want to get to their senior year and have 1 science credit. If,
Yeah, I usually recommend starting the ninth grade year as if they're going to go to college. And that's not hard to do because a lot of what you're doing is pretty uniform no matter what. But then proceed with classes that would get you into college until you decide that's not on the table and then you can stop. But it's always better to be prepared. It's harder to go back and cram in credits the senior year, like you said.
And, some kids are going to take AP classes and honor classes. Doesn't mean your children have to do all of that, but we have seen several instances where a child said in the ninth grade, I'll never go to college. Well, then in the 12th grade, they're 3 years more mature and down the road, and they want to go to college. And all of a sudden, they have to realize we've got to take an extra year just to meet the basic requirements. And
Absolutely.
and so I think your advice about starting in the ninth grade is good because whether they go to the military, whether they go into the trades at a 2-year school, whether they go start their own business, there's going to be a certain basis of course requirements or knowledge they're going to need for most kids. Not all kids, but for most kids.
Yeah. And like in South Carolina, you want to meet the minimum high school diploma requirements so that you can say they earned a diploma. And that speaks a lot, even if it's a parent generated diploma. If you can put that together, if you can present that to a military recruiter or an employer or a 2-year college or a 4-year college, that means a lot and they want to see that. So at a minimum, get what's required for that diploma. But then, as you said, on top of that, just know what you need for what you plan to pursue. Occasionally, I've seen people get to the junior or senior year and say, oh, we're looking at this, whatever top tier college, we're looking at MIT. And they didn't realize that there's a lot of things that you need to, it's a whole different ballgame when you're looking at a top tier college. So just be aware if that's something that's really important to your family and on the radar, you definitely want to start in ninth grade, exploring those AP courses and having conversations with the college. I think a big mistake that people make is not actually contacting the college. There seems to be this fear of picking up the phone and calling the admissions office. And really, they don't mind. And especially as your student gets a little older, I would say by the time they're a sophomore, junior, have your student call the admissions office. Have them ask those questions. Homeschoolers are good at that. Help them know what questions to ask. but put them on the phone and let them make that connection. There are colleges who will track the inquiries like that, and they like to see if a student is reaching out. It shows interest. So when they're weighing applications and they're having to make decisions, if they know they have a student who has reached out to the college and asked questions and has come to a preview day and has really shown interest, they're more likely to offer them a spot because they know they're more likely to take the spot because they are interested. They're not just applying to rack up another acceptance on their list.
So, one thing I want to just cover briefly, that's the transcript. Just so you know, I've had Lenisser James on here before talking about transcripts. I'll put that in the show notes. But there's several ways to approach the transcript. The parent can do it. I think HSLDA used to and may still have a program for transcripts. Our organization, our state organization, SCAES, South Carolina Association of Independent Homeschools, Beth, where you were the high school director, we did the transcripts for the parents. And so the parents sent in all the information and they did all the teaching. We just compiled the transcript based on what we knew colleges were looking for. So there are all kinds of options out there for developing the transcript. You just want to make sure you have a transcript that is going to be accessible not by you, but by the person reading it in the 2-year or 4-year college.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worth researching a little bit what is done, and you might be able to even find, there's lots of things you can find online now, but find out a little bit of what's done in your area, especially if you're looking at a college in your area. I think the private colleges, the Christian colleges, are going to be a little bit more accommodating as long as it's typed and professional looking. But like, for example, in South Carolina, if you want to be eligible for some of our state lottery scholarships, the transcripts have to be very specific. There's some very specific wording and components that need to be included and ways for calculating the GPA that have to be followed in order to get those. So that's where an organization like SCAES is great because they know all of that and they make sure that their transcripts are accepted for that. Each state's going to be a little bit different, but you do want to do a little research as to what it is you need on there. And just remember that you want to be as transparent as possible on the transcript. I know as moms, our kids are all the best that there is, and they all should deserve 100%. But an admissions office sees right through a transcript of all 100%. So be realistic with their grades and what you put on there. And it's okay if they don't have perfect scores in every class.
One other thing, the tests you take to get into colleges, not necessarily 2-year colleges, but 4-year colleges, are the ACT, the SAT, and some colleges are taking the CLT now. And we don't have a lot of time to spend on that now in this podcast, but I did 2 podcasts with Jean Burke teaching the SAT. We'll put that in our notes as well, podcast notes as well, so that you can hop on and listen to those 2 courses, those 2 podcasts on how to prepare your kid for the SAT or the ACT. As we close, there are 2 more questions I want to ask Beth, but I just want to say we are not pushing college. There are a lot of things to consider. The level of debt you want. There are online options now that are phenomenal. There's a way to beef up the ACT scores or SAT scores to get more scholarships. So there are all types of ways to go to college. There are 2-year schools, there are trade schools that are really gaining in population. There's the military now that's so accepting of high school students. We've talked about that on former broadcasts as well. They love homeschoolers now. That has not always been the case. There's gap years that kids take and they study abroad or they do service opportunities for a year in a little bit of a more formal setting. And so they're all types of options now for your homeschool kids. And people are learning to see the value in homeschool children in terms of their work ethic, their faith, their soft skills, ability to get along with people. So we just want to encourage you that homeschooling in high school is not a dead end. It is really a gateway to a life full of opportunities for your children. So, Beth, as we close, what advice would you give to parents out there who may feel like they're already behind in the process, or they have a ninth grader, or they're thinking about high school in the seventh grade? What would you tell them?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would say to pray about it. But if you feel like God is leading you to that path, I think you have to just forge ahead in obedience, and you have to trust that God will guide you in that process. He's not going to lead you to something and then just leave you hanging. He's going to guide you through it. And with the tremendous amount of tools we have available, there's no need to feel overwhelmed or to feel inadequate for the task. And I speak as someone who has felt both overwhelmed and inadequate. But there are so many things out there to help you, whether all the things you mentioned, the online classes, the video instruction, the one-on-one tutoring, the co-ops, all of those things that can help. But also, I don't want to sell short what a parent can just do at home. And we are educating our kids, and we don't have to be perfect at it to still do a good job. So I will say I was not an expert in most of the fields that I taught my kids. When I got to high school, I realized how far behind my public education was. I didn't feel inadequate at all to be teaching them. But what I did know is that I could learn with them. And so I just approached it from the standpoint of, okay, we're both going to learn this subject together. I don't know chemistry. You don't know chemistry. We're going to learn chemistry together. And there's a couple of things about that. Number one is that it shows my humbleness and willingness to still learn and to say, I don't know everything. We don't have to be experts. But also, it taught my kids the value of just wrestling with the subject matter and digging in and learning something. And one of the most exciting and rewarding things I see today in my kids at the ages they are is how they aren't afraid to teach themselves new things. I'm constantly hearing them talking about something that they learned how to do because they weren't intimidated by it. They found some videos, they talked to people, they read a book, and they just taught themselves how to do it. And that's exciting. I mean, what better thing to do for our kids than to teach them how to learn? And the other thing I would remind parents is that our kids are individuals. So we are not manufacturing cars. We're not trying to put them on the factory line and have everybody come out the same. We want to teach our children as individuals. We want to cater to their strengths and their weaknesses. And you as the parent know better than anybody what those are. And you can best help them determine that and help them walk that path. So there's so many beautiful things about the high school years. And I would just say dive in and explore the resources. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. And don't be afraid if you're not a subject matter expert, you can do it.
Amen. Well, Beth, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your wisdom, your ups and downs as a homeschooling parent with us today. How can people get in touch with you if they're looking for more information?
Yeah, so again, I'm with the Upstate Homeschool Co-op, and I think, can you drop that information into
Absolutely.
yeah, you can find me on there under the high school page, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. I love talking to parents. So many parents or other people encouraged me over the years and got me to where I am today. You included, Zan. You're one of those people that helped get me to where I am today. And so I love kind of giving back and doing that for other people as well.
Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been, I hope, a really encouraging conversation for you, a lot of information. We want you not to be overwhelmed, but to be encouraged as you continue to teach your teens at home. It's really a double blessing in so many ways. As always, you can find me at zantyler.com and on social media. And until next time, bye.